In this lesson, we'll take a look at some tools for modeling with polygons. So let's jump back into Maya, and this is O3 Begin in your project files. This is sort of an industrial sci-fi kind of environment set from a course by one of our authors, Ashish Dani, and I've chosen to use this for a very specific reason. It looks very complex. It looks really, really cool. There's a lot of neat detail on this model, and it's something that if you are new to modeling, then it can look very intimidating, very complex, and maybe start to think, how could I ever build something like that? But if you really start to look at it, and you start to look at the basic shapes, they're pretty simple shapes. I mean, we have flat planes here, and we have kind of capsule shapes. Now, it looks great, but if you break it down into kind of more manageable chunks, you can see that there are pieces that are duplicated. So we have kind of a section here that's unique, and then that section is repeated. And having that repeat, these pieces right in here, it adds a lot of complexity and makes it look really, really cool. Okay, so that's one of the things that we pride ourselves on here at Digital Tutors, is making things that are very complex and even advanced and intimidating, making them very manageable by breaking them down into smaller bite-sized chunks as far as the lesson goes, and then going through step by step, building some of the smaller pieces, putting together each section and copying those over. And by doing that, you can take something that maybe is intimidating like this and really be successful building that up, just going step by step, smaller bites. And so when you go through Digital Tutors courses, that's what you're going to find with the step-by-step courses, is kind of that breaking down of the large projects into smaller bites. Okay, so that will really help you feel successful building something that may at first seem a little bit intimidating to you. Okay, so one other thing that I want to talk about, I've kind of separated this model out into display layers, and that's going to be found under here in the channel box layer editor. You can add display layers. There's little boxes next to it. The V just means the visibility, and I've got this set to the set and the tank. And so if I turn off the set, you can see it's basically everything but this little section here. Turn off the visibility, and I can do the same thing here to turn off the tank. The little R means that's a reference. And so all that means is if I turn this off, I can select any of these objects. If I turn this to template, it kind of just shows the wireframe. But if I turn it to reference, then it shows up just normally, but I can't select it. So then all I can select is what's on this particular layer. This will make things a little bit easier as we try to select things through, and there are objects in the background. So you can use layers definitely to your advantage, especially when you start working with larger scenes. So let's talk a little bit about some simple polygon modeling tools. Let's say that for this capsule here, and I'll just hit the F key, so let's kind of center that up. We want to create kind of a tube that comes up and connects seamlessly with this object. So the first thing that we might do is add something that looks like a tube. So maybe a cylinder shape. So remember we talked about primitives. We'll go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and let's create a cylinder. Now we can move it into our position. So we'll hit the W key to move. Kind of move this up and over. F, frame up, and then I'll kind of move it over into position. Now with our primitives, we can always go back and change the creation parameters by going into our input. And so we'll go to polycylinder 2, this node, and you can see I can now change the radius. I'm just middle mouse dragging in the view. I can change the height, so I can make this a little bit higher. I can change the subdivisions around the axis, so you can see I can make that more subdivisions or fewer subdivisions. You can see the fewer subdivisions there are in the circle, the more jagged it becomes. The more subdivisions, the smoother it becomes. You can also add subdivisions along the height. Now this is where we start to think about efficiency. If it's a pipe that's not ever going to deform or we won't need to move it, we can leave that as is. But if there's any kind of bends or detail that we need to add along this length, we're going to need points there, because that's the only place a polygon object can be deformed, are at positions of the vertices. So we would need to add subdivisions there. We don't really need to do that here, so we'll leave it alone. I also want to be able to see the wireframe on all the objects. So I'm going to turn on wireframe on shaded, this little blue box here. That'll give us an idea of that wireframe, where those polygons are. So I want to combine these two together. So what I can do is just click on one, shift click on the other, go to our polygons menu set, go up to mesh, and we'll hit combine. That'll create one polygon object. Now, the points are still all separate, but it is part of one object. So now if we'd like to connect this up, let me go ahead and delete the faces on top where we'd like to create this connection. And then I'm going to figure out where I want to actually connect this up. This is 10 coming around, and so I want to find an area or a hole that's going to have the same resolution. So looking at this, this has, if we use these 6 faces, we take a look, there's 3 edges on this side, 3 edges on this side, and then 2 on the top and on the bottom. That gives us 10. So let's go ahead and delete those polygons. That gives us this sort of square-shaped hole here. But the resolution around the border of it is the same as this cylinder. Okay, so there's a 1-to-1 connection between the points, or the number of points. Now, there's an edge flowing right down the center, so what I'm going to do is go into the top view, and you can see I don't have the same edge lined up here, so I'm going to double click. That selects the entire cylinder, and let's rotate this a little bit. So you can rotate it until that lines up. We can also move it a little bit so it's in the right position. And so using your different views will really help you do that. We can also choose the vertices, and let me kind of pull this down a little bit. Now I want to create a seamless connection. So let's go ahead and double click on this edge, and then we'll double click on this edge. So both of these edges are selected. And now we want to do something called a bridge. So we'll go up to Edit Mesh, and we'll choose Bridge. And let's actually open up the options. So a linear bridge will give us a straight line between these 2 edges, straight to there. What we want to do is create a smooth bridge. So we'll turn on Smooth Path. The number of divisions, we'll see how many lines are there going to be between this point and this point. So we can go ahead and set that down. We can modify these after the fact too, but let's go ahead and do a bridge. Now you can see it's created a smooth transition from this circular shape to this square shape. Now looking at this, you can see that it's kind of twisted. So this point is actually twisting over and connecting with this point. Well, we can go to our bridge offset, and as I middle mouse drag it, you can see different points are connecting in different ways. So if I just change that to 1, you can see that center line connects up with this center line and creates a much cleaner shape. Now, what if we want to add edge loops to create some kind of ribbed detail down the surface? We can do that very quickly using the Insert Edge Loop tool. That can be found under Edit Mesh, Insert Edge Loop tool, and we'll just click and drag, and you can see that green line telling us where that edge loop is going to be created. And so we'll go ahead and just add edge loops wherever we want. And then we can select the polygons by going to Face, clicking, and to select the entire loop, we'll Shift double click on the one next to it. Shift click, Shift double click. Now we can do something called Extrude, which you're going to do a lot if you're going to be doing any sort of polygon modeling. And so to do that, we'll go into Edit Mesh, Extrude. That'll bring up this manipulator, and we'll just drag out some thickness. And you can see that that pulls out new faces from the existing faces. And now we've got a pipe that's connected seamlessly with our original tank. Okay, now those tools seem simple, but you're going to be using those a lot if you're going to be doing any sort of polygon modeling. You can get some very detailed results by just using extruding and inserting edge loops and some very simple polygon modeling tools. Okay, so let's go ahead in the next lesson and talk about a different type of geometry. We'll talk about something called NURBS. So we'll go ahead and do that next.